Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Surah Al-Baqarah 257 to 259. Lesson of Quran by Thinker of Quran, Allama Ghulam Ahmed Parwez. My dear friends, today is the 27th of July, 1969, and the series of lessons from the Holy Quran begins with verse 257 of Surah Al-Baqarah 257. In the previous verse it was said, فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى لَا انْفِصَامَ لَهَا. 256. Whoever turns away from Taghut, rejects it, and believes in the truths of Allah, has indeed grasped a firm support that can never break. In the lexicon, the word Taghut has also been used for religious priesthood. I had explained that in terms of its root, Taghut refers to any individual, nation, ideology, or system that rebels against the laws of Allah. But in the dictionary, its meaning is given as religious leaders, and this is also correct. Deen is the name of obedience to the laws of Allah, while religion is the name of following man-made beliefs and ideologies. These man-made constructs in the world of religion are created and shaped by religious leaders themselves. Therefore, in this sense, the dictionary meaning also fits perfectly. Whoever replaces the laws of Allah with obedience to any other law, or makes others obey such laws, falls under Taghut. The worst form of Taghut is when man-made laws, sects, and customs are attributed to Allah. This very point is repeated in the verse under discussion. Allahu waliyyu alladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min adh-dhulumati ila an-nur, walladhina kafaru awliya'uhum at-taghut, yukhrijunahum min an-nuri ila adh-dhulumat, ulaika ashabun nar, hum fiha khalidun. Rejection of Taghut and faith in Allah is the true path.
Quranic view on Awliya Allah. According to the Quran, Awliya Allah are not a separate group. I had explained earlier that rejection of Taghut is negation, la, while faith in Allah is affirmation, ilah. Now the question arises, what results from these two? Allah is the master, protector, helper, friend, and the one who provides strength. These are the meanings of wali. Later, when the Quran mentions Awliya Allah, I will elaborate further, but for now it is important to note this does not refer to a distinct group. When Allah calls himself wali, it means he is the one who strengthens, protects, commands, and helps. When he refers to believers as Awliya Allah, the meaning is that they are obedient, submissive, and compliant to his commands. Thus, according to the Quran, every believer is Awliya's wali, and Allah is his wali. It is not a separate class among the believers. As I mentioned, a detailed discussion will come later at the relevant place. For now, it is sufficient to understand that those who obey the divine laws receive Allah's strength, support, and guidance. He becomes their protector. Now the question is, what does he do as their protector?
Why the Quran uses singular for light and plural for darknesses? The verse, يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ declares that Allah brings people out of darknesses into light. This expression carries profound meaning. In the Quran, light, nur, is always mentioned in the singular form, while darknesses, dhulumat, are always expressed in the plural. The reason is that truth is one, correct guidance is singular, and the right answer can only be one. In contrast, falsehood has countless variations. Errors can be infinite, and deviations take many shapes. The Quran here is not referring to physical light and darkness. Rather, it speaks of the darkness of human thought, misguided beliefs, corrupt ideologies, unjust systems, and degenerate civilizations. Among these, the deepest darkness is that of superstition. Another subtle point in the word dhulumat is tied to the root meaning of dhulum. The essence of dhulum is that something is not placed where it should be. In a wrong system, the fundamental flaw is that the rightful person, principle, or value is displaced, and something else is wrongly put in its place. This misplacement disrupts the entire machinery of life. Thus, the Quran's choice of singular for nur and plural for dhulumat beautifully conveys that truth is one, while falsehood manifests in countless forms.
Reason for the ruined civilizational life. In civilizational life, because things are not physically visible, the matter is not quickly understood. Consider a machine. If you remove its parts and then reassemble them, but do not place each part where it should be, the machine will still contain all its parts, yet none will be in its proper place. The result of such misplacement is obvious. The machine will fail. This is exactly what is happening to us and to the world at large. Everywhere the same destruction occurs. What should be in its rightful place is not there. That is why the Quran refers to these conditions as dhulumats, darknesses. Darkness means that where there should be light, there is none. The Quran explains what this darkness truly is. It is the disorder of human systems, the misplacement of values, and the corruption of social structures. Where truth, justice, and divine guidance should illuminate life, falsehood and misplacement create darkness instead.
Quranic meaning of takdhib and the value of intellect. On an individual level, the concepts are easy to grasp. We ourselves speak of the darkness of ignorance and the light of intellect, the light of knowledge. The Quran expresses this in 2 words. وَالَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا 639. Those who reject our laws. The word takdhib here is very deep. It does not simply mean denial. They do not deny verbally. They even acknowledge with their tongues. But in practice, they falsify it. They reject it through their actions. Those who commit takdhib of our laws are described as summum wa bukmum fid dhulumati 639. Deaf, dumb, and dwelling in darkness. People who do not use intellect and thought. These are the true darknesses. The Quran emphasizes that the greatest distinction given to human beings is intellect and thought, the ability to acquire knowledge, the capacity to reflect and reach conclusions. This is a tremendous gift. Later verses add further dimensions, but the fundamental quality that elevates humans above animals is intellect and reasoning. Those who fail to use it are described as deaf and dumb, living in darkness. In the world of religion, however, the use of intellect and thought is often declared forbidden. Reflection and questioning are discouraged. People are told to blindly follow what has always been practiced, without seeing with their eyes, without listening with their ears, without uttering a word against it. They are turned into blind, deaf, and dumb followers.
The Quran says that those who do not use intellect and thought are the ones who dwell in zolamats, darknesses. This is the first point. Those who fail to employ reason and reflection are described as living in darkness. In contrast, when the Quran speaks of nur, light, it clearly refers to the light of knowledge, the light of intellect and insight, the light of reflection and contemplation. This is a great blessing, and it is the individual dimension of the matter. The Quran also speaks of the collective dimension of life. In the story of the Bani Israel, it describes the period of their subjugation when 3 forms of tyranny were imposed upon them. The first was the oppression of monarchy, referred to as Pharaonism. Monarchy is not the rule of law, but the rule of a single person, and its tyranny is absolute. The second was the deceit of Haman, representing religious priesthood and its conspiracies. The third was the blood-soaked exploitation of Qarun, symbolizing the system of capitalism. Thus, the Quran identifies ignorance and misuse of intellect as darkness on the individual level, and tyranny in the form of monarchy, priesthood, and capitalism as darkness on the collective level.
Purpose of sending Prophet Musa with divine law and the Quranic concept of freedom and slavery. The Quran explains that 3 curses of humanity were imposed upon the Israelites: the tyranny of monarchy, the deceit of religious priesthood, and the blood-soaked exploitation of capitalism. The nation was chained in these shackles. To liberate them, Allah sent Prophet Musa, Moses. The Quran states,
وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا مُوسَى بِآيَاتِنَا. We sent Musa with our laws. The purpose was made clear. أَنْ أَخْرِجْ قَوْمَكَ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. Lead your people out of darknesses into light. These darknesses were the oppressive systems that enslaved them. In human terminology, subjugation means that one nation comes and makes another nation subservient, establishing its rule over them. This is slavery, the loss of freedom when a nation is forced under foreign domination. Freedom, in the Quranic sense, means establishing one's own system of governance based on divine law. It is not merely the absence of foreign rule, but the presence of a just order where Allah's guidance governs life. According to the Quran, the definition of slavery and freedom is not what we commonly understand. In human terminology, slavery means that a foreign nation subjugates another nation and imposes its rule, while freedom means that a nation establishes its own government. But the Quran presents a deeper meaning. For the community of believers, slavery means living under any laws other than the laws of Allah, even if those laws are imposed by their own people. The question of foreign or native rule does not arise here. The real question is, which laws, which system, which constitution governs your life? If it is non-divine, then it is slavery, regardless of who enforces it. Freedom, in the Quranic sense, means living solely under the laws of Allah. It is not defined by whether the laws are imposed by one's own people or by outsiders. Freedom is submission to divine law alone. The Quran tells us that Prophet Musa was sent to lead the Israelites out of darkness into light. In the life of the Valley of Sinai, they were freed from the three curses: monarchy, Pharaonism, religious priesthood, Hamanism, and capitalism, Qarunism. In place of human subjugation, the laws of Allah were established. Monarchy ceased, priesthood ended, capitalism was abolished. The Quran called this Nur, light.
Quranic values: knowledge, intellect, understanding, and will as light. According to the Quran, if a person possesses knowledge, intellect, comprehension, perception, choice, and will, then this is Nur, light. Otherwise, it is darkness. I had explained earlier that Nur is knowledge, intellect, and thought. It is light, but intellect alone is not sufficient. Human intellect is like the eye, which cannot see without the light of the sun. Similarly, human intellect and thought require the light of divine revelation. An individual's intellect guides him towards safeguarding his own interests, regardless of the means. The collective intellect of a nation guides it towards protecting its own survival, even at the expense of other nations. This is why nations often exploit others, draining them of their last drop of blood so that their own people may flourish. Intellect alone seeks self-interest. It cannot safeguard the interests of others. Divine revelation, however, provides standards and laws from Allah, the Lord of all creation, who nurtures the entire universe. This is the difference between individual intellect and divine light. Human intellect protects personal or national interests, while divine revelation protects the interests of all humanity. This is the true light, and it comes only from Allah's book, through the guidance of revelation.
Human intellect without divine revelation is blind. I had given the example of the human eye. If there is no sunlight, no external light, then the eye is useless. And if there is abundant light but the eyes are closed, that light is also useless. In the same way, intellect and revelation must work together. Only then can the correct path be found. This is why the Quran says in Surah Ibrahim, Alif, Kitabun anzalna'u ilayka. O Messenger, this book, this revelation, we have sent down to you. Litokhrijan nasa min adh-dhulumati ila nuri, so that you may bring mankind out of darknesses into light. The book was given for this very purpose, and the messenger's duty was to guide humanity in the light of revelation from darkness into light. At the time when this book and its messenger came into the world, humanity was engulfed in darkness.
According to the Quran, mankind was chained in superstition and blind imitation. Heavy slabs of tyranny were crushing them. Through the light of revelation, the messenger broke those chains and lifted those burdens from humanity. Thus, mankind was brought out of dhulumati into nur.
The greatest darkness for humanity, religious priesthood. The Quran identifies the greatest darkness for humanity as that created by religious priesthood. As explained, the deepest darkness is superstition, born from religion. Humanity finds it almost impossible to escape from these shackles. At first, there may be some resistance, but gradually people are taught that whatever was practiced before must continue blindly. Generations pass, and this becomes ingrained. Nature itself has a law. In biology, if a human or an animal ceases to use a particular organ, nature eventually renders it useless. Bats were not originally blind, they had eyes, but since they kept their eyes closed to sunlight, nature deemed them unnecessary. As a result, bats can no longer open their eyes in daylight, preferring darkness instead. They flutter in confusion when the sun rises. If it were within their power, they would prevent the sun from rising altogether. The same is true for the bats of humanity. Darkness suits them, they rejoice in it. Whenever a ray of light appears, they begin to flutter and scream. Just as the sun is of no use to bats except to disturb them, so too does divine light create only agitation and unrest for those who have chosen to live in darkness.
The blindness of intellect under the veil of imitation. When the bandage of blind imitation covers the eyes of nations, not only does the Book of Allah become useless for them, but even if its light begins to shine, they flutter, scream, and cry out against it. The voice of the Quran arose, and a global upheaval was stirred. What is this? It is like bats fleeing from the light. Thus, for humanity, the light of revelation and the eye of intellect must work together. Only then can mankind move from darkness into light. And the nation that does so, the Quran has clearly stated what awaits it. Conventional concept of durood and salat and their true meaning in the Quran. The greatest blessing that can be given is expressed in our tradition with the words durood and salam. Commonly, only one verse of the Quran is brought forward. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. 33:56. Allah and His angels send blessings upon the Prophet. O believers, you too should do so. However, in the same Surah Al-Ahzab, a few verses earlier, the Quran states, Kuwa levi yusalli alaykum wa malaikatahu. Allah and His angels send blessings upon you, the community of believers. This shows that the concept of durood and salat in the Quran is not confined to the Prophet alone. It extends to the entire community of believers. The Quran emphasizes that Allah's support, mercy, and blessings are directed toward those who live by His laws, and the angels also strengthen and support them. Thus, the Quran presents durood and salat as divine favor and reinforcement, not merely ritual words, but a reality of Allah's guidance and support for both the Prophet and the collective of believers. 2 verses earlier, the Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, idhkurullaha dhikran kathiran, 33:41, wasabbihuhu bukratan wa asila, 33:42. O believers, keep the laws of Allah constantly before you, never letting them slip from your sight. Morning and evening, persistently, insistently, repeatedly, and continuously, remain engaged in fulfilling the program He has prescribed. If you do this, then remember, Allah and His angels send blessings upon you. The result of this is described, لِيُخْرِجَكُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ, so that He may bring you out of darknesses into light. Here, the Quran addresses the entire community of believers. It is not the conventional interpretation of dhikr as striking the heart or tasbih as counting beads in seclusion. According to the Quran, dhikr means keeping divine laws ever present, and tasbih means actively working to fulfill the divine program with consistency.
This connects back to the creation of man when the angels questioned, وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. We glorify you with praise and sanctify you. If tasbih and taqdih were merely verbal rituals, the angels were already engaged in them. The divine response was, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. I know what you do not know, namely the role humanity would play in establishing divine order on earth.
Purpose of Adam's creation in relation to the subjugation of the universe. The Quran explains that when the angels said, وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ, 2:30, we glorify you with praise and sanctify you, they were already engaged in this. If the ultimate purpose of man's creation had been only to perform verbal glorification, then the angels were already doing so. In that case, the divine response, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun, 2:30, I know what you do not know, would not have been meaningful. The reality was something different. The angels did not know that humanity was destined for a unique role. The Quran clarifies that the purpose of Adam's creation was to harness and subjugate the forces of nature, bringing them under the laws of Allah for the collective progress of mankind. This was the mission entrusted to humanity. When this truth was revealed, the angels bowed before Adam. This was the stage of taskhir kayanat, the subjugation of the universe. But the Quran emphasizes that this mission is only completed when these forces are utilized under the guidance of divine revelation. Without revelation, the same forces can lead to corruption and bloodshed, as the angels had warned. Yufsidu fiha wa yasfiku dima'a, 2:30. He will spread corruption and shed blood. Therefore, the Quran states that the community of believers, guided by revelation, will fulfill this mission, as expressed in هو الذي يصلي عليكم وملائكته ليخرجكم من الظلمات إلى النور, 33:43. Allah and His angels strengthen you so that you may be brought out of darknesses into light. This is the divine purpose of humanity, to subjugate the forces of nature under God's law for the upliftment of mankind.
Quranic light that protects human intellect from fear. My dear friends, how great a blessing it is to move from darkness into light. Consider this on the small scale. If your room is dark at night, even the slightest rustling sound can overwhelm you with fear. In that darkness, ropes may appear to you as snakes. But a single matchstick with its tiny flame reveals the rope as rope and the snake as snake. The function of light is to show everything in its true reality. Fear and dread arise only when we mistake one thing for another, when superstition makes us see a rope as a snake. In light, superstition vanishes. You do not fear a rope, and if it is truly a snake, you take measures to protect yourself. This clarity is possible only in light, not in darkness. That is why the Quran declares regarding the believers who come into light, وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ, 2:62. Upon them there shall be no fear, nor shall they grieve. My dear friends, fear exists only in darkness, not in light. The darkness that stems from false beliefs and superstitions paralyzes human intellect, and history itself testifies to how much fear it creates. Fear is the very thing that drags man down from the station of humanity. Returning to the verse we began, Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu, yukhrijuhum min al-dhulumati ila an-nur, wal-ladhina kafaru awliya'uhum at-taghut, yukhrijunahum min an-nuri ila al-dhulumati, 2:57. Allah is the protector of those who believe. He brings them out of darknesses into light. In contrast, the allies of Taghut drag people from light back into darkness. The Quran emphasizes that this is not merely the absence of light. Even when light is present, Taghut strives to lead people away from it and plunge them into darkness. Our neglect of the Quranic light. This light is none other than the Book of Allah. The Quran itself declares, وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا. The word of your Lord has been perfected in truth and justice. It further says, لَا مُبَدِّلَ لِكَلِمَاتِهِ. None can alter his words. And, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا ذِكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. We have revealed this reminder, and we shall preserve it. Thus, the Quran is a complete, unchangeable, and eternally safeguarded code of life. Historical testimony confirms that not a single letter has been altered. This is the greatest source of light for humanity. Yet our collective condition remains engulfed in darkness. Who has dragged us into this darkness? The Quran answers, يُخْرِجُونَهُم مِّنَ النُّورِ إِلَى الظُّلُمَاتِ. Taghut pulls them from light into darkness. Their entire effort is to prevent the nation from reaching this light. Because if the light of the Quran shines, the first to be exposed will be the so-called sacred elite, revealed as conspirators and deceivers. Therefore, they strive to keep people in darkness, employing strange tactics. Alongside them, ruling powers form alliances, creating a system of oppression. Their greatest weapon is economic control, making people dependent on bread, so that survival itself becomes a chain binding them to darkness. This is the tragedy. A divine, eternal, safeguarded light exists, yet humanity is deliberately kept away from it by the combined forces of priesthood and oppressive rulers. See, the same Pharaoh, Haman, and Qarun come together again. Haman and his armies, this is what the Quran says, the work of Haman and his forces is to keep people intoxicated in morning rituals of remembrance and thought. Mastra ko ziko fikre subhagahi mein use, pukhta tar kar do mizaje khanaqahi mein use. They tell people that their duty is only to remain attached to Allah, to leave worldly affairs to the people of the world and not to trouble themselves with them. They say it is fine if all kinds of darkness are imposed upon you, because true light is only within the heart. Their function is to keep people absorbed in this illusion, showing ropes as snakes and keeping them content in darkness. This is the meaning of يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ 2:57. When light is present, yet a nation chooses to remain in darkness and become satisfied with it, that is the greatest misfortune for that nation and for humanity. As I have explained, they become like a generation of bots, preferring darkness and disturbed by light. The Quran says, أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ. Their hopes, goals, and ambitions are scorched. هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. They remain trapped in it forever. Who can rescue them from there? All that was needed was the acceptance of light. But when light is present and they still remain in darkness, who can bring them out of it? Story of nations deprived of the light presented by the Quran. Now the Quran in its own style presents the testimony of history. The supreme founder of the Millat-e-Hanifa, Hazrat Ibrahim, peace be upon him, holds a very exalted position. There was a clash with monarchy. You know that he was the son of the greatest high priest of the kingdom, the chief hierophant. It was a very high office, a very great position. The first thing he said at home to his father was, "In what darkness are you surrounded? You make an idol with your own hands, and then you bow before it. How great a humiliation of humanity this is." But the matter did not end there. The Quran tells us that the prophets come to establish the right system in place of the wrong one. The Quran states that Hazrat Ibrahim and the family of Ibrahim were granted a great kingdom. The matter progressed from priests and worshippers to the king himself. At that time, it was a monarchy. The Quran says, "Alam tara ila alladhi hajja Ibrahima fi rabbihi." Have you considered the one who disputed with Ibrahim about his Lord? Why did he dispute? An atahu lahul mulka, not because he possessed truth, knowledge, or reasoning, but simply because he had been given kingship and power. The Quran makes a profound point. Those in power consider themselves the sole possessors of intellect, wisdom, and knowledge. Do you not recall when Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Harun went to Pharaoh? When they began to speak, Pharaoh said, "Should we listen to them? Should we consider their words?" When وَقَوْمُهُمَا لَنَا عَابِدُونَ, their people are our subjects. How can the words of a subjugated people be worthy of consideration? The intoxication of power is immense. Thus the Quran says, "An atahu lahul mulka." He argued only because he had kingship. Then Ibrahim declared, "If qala Ibrahim Rabbi alladhi yuhyi wa yumit." My Lord is the one who gives life and causes death. The greatest reality is life and death, and my Lord is he whose law governs both. Individual and collective life under divine laws. My dear friends, life and death in the individual sense, personal birth and personal death,
operate under the natural laws of God. According to these laws, life comes into existence, and according to them, it eventually becomes dormant. This was the point made by Hazrat Ibrahim. As for collective life, the Quran presents an equally profound principle. In the clash between the forces of truth and falsehood in Medina, the Quran declares, لِيَهْلِكَ مَنْ هَلِكَ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ وَيَحْيَى مَنْ حَيَّ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ, so that whoever perishes does so upon clear evidence, and whoever lives does so upon clear evidence. This means that in God's system, there is no arbitrariness. Destruction and survival are not based on favoritism or manipulation. They are determined by clear laws and reasoning. A nation survives because it deserves to survive. A nation perishes because it is unworthy of survival. Hazrat Ibrahim explained that such matters are decided by divine law. But how could a despotic ruler accept this? The tyrant declared, Ana uhi wa umitu. I give life and cause death. He claimed that life and death were in his hands, that he could spare whom he wished and kill whom he wished. To demonstrate, he pardoned a man already sentenced to death and ordered the execution of an innocent person. He said, "See, I give life and I cause death." But this was only a superficial claim. The reality is that these acts are merely causes, not the fundamental law itself. When a man consumes poison, it is not poison that independently kills him. He kills himself by violating the law. When a sword cuts the throat, the sword is only the instrument. The true law lies beyond these causes, in the divine system that governs life and death. Method of prophets and messengers is not debate or argumentation. As I mentioned, the matter here could have turned into a theoretical dispute. But the way of a prophet or messenger is not through debates or arguments. When he sees that the opponent is engaging in obstinate disputation, he does not proceed further in that field. His purpose is not to win a debate or gain victory in argument. His mission is to present the truth. If the other side descends into mere contentiousness, the prophet does not waste his time or energy there. He immediately turns to another approach, presenting something tangible, something perceptible, which the opponent cannot refute. If this situation had arisen before a philosopher, he would have continued arguing, or if it had been before a religious debater, the entire night would have been consumed in disputation. The outcome would be foaming mouths, fiery eyes, foreheads marked with mystical diagrams, and even physical confrontation. That is why no debate or argument has ever truly reached a conclusion. The style in such settings is only to refute the opponent, to humiliate him, not to establish the truth so that the reality becomes clear. The Quran in another place presents this principle in a most beautiful manner. Hazrat Musa's fundamental demand to Pharaoh. The Quran says, فَأَرْسِلْ مَعَنَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ وَلَا تُعَذِّبْهُمْ 20:47. Hazrat Musa went to Pharaoh and said, "We have come to demand that you allow the children of Israel to leave with us, and that you do not torment them." The demand was clear and definite, leaving no room for argument. On the surface, it seemed simple. What harm would it cause Pharaoh if a portion of the population wanted to leave and settle elsewhere? They were not asking to take wealth or property with them. Pharaoh could have imposed the condition that they leave behind all possessions and still let them go. But the reality was deeper. If a ruler allows his subjects to leave, then over whom will he rule? The essence of Pharaoh's refusal was not about wealth or land, but about maintaining control and authority. His power depended on keeping the people subjugated, and releasing them meant undermining the very foundation of his rule. Rule of humans requires that they be considered subjects. Without subjects, there can be no rule. The pleasure derived from ruling makes it necessary for a ruler to always have a subjugated people, a dependent group, under his control. To satisfy the lust for power, he cannot allow them to leave, though he would never openly admit that he keeps them bound only to enjoy the sweetness of authority. He did not want to say this, and he had no other argument. The Quran says that Pharaoh devised a scheme. He said to Moses, "Leave this matter aside." قَالَ فَمَا بَالُ الْقُرُونِ الْأُولَى 20:51. Tell me instead about the generations of old. What is the condition of our ancestors and the elders of my court who are sitting here? Are they in hell or paradise? The matter was clear. They were idolaters, and their forefathers were idolaters too. Moses would have to say that they are burning in hell. As soon as he said this, Pharaoh incited anger. "Look, this man says that your great ancestors are in hell." A commotion spread, a fire was lit, and the real issue was left aside. The real issue was simply this: allow the children of Israel to leave with me. But Pharaoh diverted the matter, asking instead, "What is the condition of my ancestors and theirs? Are they in paradise or hell?" Observe the style of a prophet. Hazrat Musa replied, قال علمها عند ربي في كتاب لا يضل ربي ولا ينسى. 20:52. The knowledge of this matter rests with my Lord, in a record. My Lord neither errs nor forgets. Then Musa brought the discussion back to the real demand. Tell me, will you allow the children of Israel to go with me or not?
Muslims entangled for centuries in fruitless theological debates. My dear friends, this is the reality. In these debates, we have wasted so much of our energy and time. The discussions revolve around matters such as how many cups of paradise's drink there will be, or the width of the leaves of Sidrata Muntaha, or the same question about the ancestors, who among them is superior, whose rank is higher. These debates continue daily, ending in quarrels and disputes. A prophet, however, immediately turns to reality. He says, "The knowledge of such matters rests with my Lord, and you need not fear any injustice there. He neither forgets nor errs, and he will deal with them exactly as they deserve." The prophet brings the discussion back to the real issue. Will you let the children of Israel go or not? This is the method of the prophets. Their purpose is not argumentation, but the establishment of truth. When Musa saw that Pharaoh was trying to entangle him in theoretical disputes, he recognized that this was merely obstinacy, supported by courtiers who delighted in academic diversions. You know what these theological debates, ilm kalam, are like. For example, the question, can God lie or not? Entire volumes have been written on this. If one says he cannot, the reply is, but he is all-powerful, so does he not have the power to lie? If one says he can, then they argue he would be a liar. Another question, can God create another God like himself or not? These are the debates of ilm kalam, proudly presented to the world as intellectual achievements. But this is not the way of the prophets. This is the way of those who remain in darkness. The prophets lead people out of darkness into light, away from fruitless disputes, towards truth and clarity.
Nations lost in theoretical debates can never know the reality of the moon's luminous face. My dear brothers, whenever a people become entangled in theoretical disputes, realities are concealed and true objectives vanish. Hazrat Ibrahim gave a clear answer. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْتِي بِالشَّمْسِ مِنَ الْمَشْرِقِ فَأْتِي بِهَا مِنَ الْمَغْرِبِ. My Lord is the one whose law brings forth the sun from the east. If you claim power, then bring it forth from the west. Instead of remaining in abstract arguments, he turned to a perceptible, undeniable proof. The Quran says, فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ. The disbeliever was confounded, left speechless. No one can exercise authority over the laws of the universe. Even the greatest ruler, the most powerful dictator, may impose his will upon people, but he cannot command a single fly to obey his order. In the external universe, no human decree prevails. Only the law of God governs. Hazrat Ibrahim immediately shifted the discussion to this reality. Tell me, does your command truly operate here? This too is part of your dominion, is it not? The Quran concludes, وَاللَّهُ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. God does not guide the unjust people. Those who choose to remain in darkness or who transgress beyond the rightful limits of their place cannot receive guidance, nor can they be rightly led.
Humanity's station beyond Adam is not attained merely through conquest of the universe. This truth, my dear friends, has become even clearer in our age. Nations that have mastered the conquest of the universe, who have studied the laws of God and then acted upon them, have acquired immense powers. They have truly reached the point where they could travel to the moon, land upon it, and return safely. This is the maqam of Adam. About Adam it was said that the angels bowed before him, and the Quran declares, وَسَخَّرَ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ, and وَسَخَّرَ لَكُم مَّا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مِّنْهُ. This is the station of Adam, the level of mankind's dominion over creation. But consider the paradox. In the very week when the Apollo mission stirred such excitement, reports showed how many robberies, murders, frauds, kidnappings, riots, and bloodshed occurred in the same region of America. One headline even noted that the wife of a previous astronaut had filed for divorce in court. On one side, they were conquering the heavens, reaching the moon without mishap. On the other side, they could not resolve the problems within their own homes, nor the social issues within their nation. The racial divide between black and white remained unresolved. The entanglement in Vietnam continued without solution. Thus, while their intellect enabled them to reach the moon, their incapacity left them unable to solve the problems of human society. No ray of light seemed to reach them in matters of civilization and humanity. This shows that the station of Adam, the conquest of nature and the universe, is not the final station. The station of humanity lies beyond, and it is attained not merely by mastering the cosmos, but by mastering justice, equality, and the moral order of life. The remedy for humanity's decline can only come through the guidance of revelation. This is the point, my dear friends, where the light of revelation becomes indispensable. How joyous it is to realize that Quranic insight had already illuminated this truth. डूबने वाला सितारों की गुज़रगाहों का अपने अफ़कार की दुनिया में सफ़र कर न सका, जिसमें सूरज की शुआओं को गिरफ्तार किया, ज़िंदगी की शबे तारीक सहर कर न सका. There are two stages. The first is the conquest of nature's forces. This is the station of Adam. To harness the powers of creation is indeed to reach the level of Adam. But the second stage is to use these forces in accordance with the guidance of God. This is the station of the believer, the station of humanity in its fullness. Today, mankind has reached the station of Adam, but not yet the station of the believer. Three categories thus appear before us. The first are those who conquer the forces of nature and employ them according to divine guidance. They are the true believers. The second are those who conquer the forces of nature but use them for selfish aims, leading to corruption and bloodshed. They reach the station of Adam, but not beyond. The third are those who neither conquer nature's forces nor use them at all. Who are they? It is us. This was the nation addressed by Iqbal, who said, Ba'adame narasidi khoda chemi jui. You have not even reached the station of Adam. How then do you seek God? Without first attaining the station of Adam, one cannot ascend to the station of humanity or the station of the believer. As the Punjabi saying goes, Tu pele bande da putar te ban, Adam da tarjuma hai hovega na Punjabiach. First become a true son of man. Only then can you translate Adam into reality.
This, my dear friends, is the distinction the Quran makes when it says, Wallahu la yahdi al-qawm al-zalimin, 2:58. Those who do not place things where they truly belong, those who misuse positions and powers, cannot be guided toward the destination of humanity. This was the king who engaged in obstinate disputation, not on the basis of knowledge, insight, or reasoning, but merely because en atahu Allahul mulka, he possessed kingship. It was nothing but arrogance born of power. What a profound truth the Quran reveals. The ruler imagines that all intellect, wisdom, and thought are his monopoly. It is the same idea expressed in the Punjabi proverb, Jedi goti achdane, ode amle visyane. Khar khan nu hove, te ona de pagal visyane hunde hi gene. Roti mukki hove, te bade to bada akalmand vi chirai, ovi os din pagal hoya hunda higa. Meaning, when a household has food, even its fools are considered wise. But when bread runs out, even the wisest appear foolish. Yet possession of power does not mean that intellect, knowledge, and wisdom belong exclusively to the ruler. The Quran moves forward from this point, introducing Al-Kalevi 2:59, bringing historical testimony to prove its claim. The tyrant ruler acts not on reason or evidence, but on the basis of pride and brute force.
Story of Bani Israel in Quran and Torah, a lesson for humanity. The Quran presents the story of Bani Israel in great detail, recounting it at multiple places to highlight its lessons. This nation's history is deeply tied to the civilized region of Mesopotamia, Iraq. Their story includes periods of rise, subjugation, resurgence, and then the long era of the wandering Jews. In 612 or 613 BCE, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar attacked Jerusalem, destroying it completely. He drove the entire nation away like herds of cattle, binding them in the shackles of slavery so tightly that no trace of human dignity remained. This was one of the most tragic periods in the history of Bani Israel. The Torah records the laments and elegies of the prophets of Israel from that era, which reveal that the nation still carried within its heart an Isas Zion, a sense of loss. This phrase was beautifully captured by Iqbal in his verse, Why Nakami, Matai Karwan Jata Raha, Karwan Kidilse Isas Zion Jata Raha. The tragedy was not only the loss of their caravan's wealth, but the greater misfortune was that the caravan itself lost the awareness of its loss. This is the lesson the Quran emphasizes through the story of Bani Israel, that decline begins not merely with external defeat, but when a nation loses its inner consciousness of what has been lost.
Story of revival in a dead nation. From the laments recorded in the Torah, it is evident that although the caravan's wealth was lost, the sense of loss remained alive in the hearts of the people. This gave hope that the nation could one day regain life. For nearly 87 years they remained in captivity until a king arose from Persia, whom the Quran refers to as Zulkarnain, 259. History calls him Cyrus the Great, also known as Khars or Kai Khusro. He defeated the Babylonians, liberated the Jews, and allowed them to return to Jerusalem. There they rebuilt their temple and regained freedom, breathing new life into their community. This century-long episode is a deeply instructive chapter in their national history. It shows that even in the darkest times, when dignity seems lost, if a nation retains within itself the awareness of loss, it carries the seed of revival. That consciousness becomes the foundation for renewal, as history bore witness in the case of Bani Israel. In the Torah, the prophet Ezekiel records a vision from that very era. He saw himself taken by God into a valley filled with scattered bones. He wondered, can these bones ever live again? The Lord said to him, proclaim your prophecy, speak your message, and then see. As Ezekiel prophesied, the bones began to stir. A rustling sound arose, movement appeared, flesh and skin covered them, and they came back to life. When his eyes opened, he realized that what seemed like the blink of an eye had in fact symbolized 100 years. This vision, or makashafa as they call it, is a powerful metaphor. It shows that even when a nation appears lifeless, if within its bones there remains the capacity for renewal, the message of a prophet can awaken it. The divine message of revolution breathes life into what seemed dead, clothing bare bones with flesh and transforming them into a new nation.
Quranic thought never lets a ruined nation despair. Iqbal expressed it beautifully. नहीं इकबाल नौ उम्मीद अपनी किश्ते वीरां से, जरा नम हो तो ये मिट्टी बड़ी जरखेज है साकी. Moisture makes soil fertile only when it still retains the capacity for growth. The Quran conveys the same principle. It teaches that if within a people there remains even a spark of desire to live, then under the guidance of revelation, they can be granted new life. Revival of life through a parable. The Quran presents a profound example. أَوْ كَالَّذِي مَرَّ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ وَهِيَ خَاوِيَةٌ عَلَى عُرُوشِهَا. Consider the one who passed by a town that had fallen into ruin, its roofs collapsed or standing empty without inhabitants. He asked, قَالَ أَنَّا يُحْيِي هَذِهِ اللَّهُ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا. How will God bring this dead town back to life? Then God caused him to remain in a state like death for 100 years, and afterwards revived him. فَأَمَاتَهُ اللَّهُ مِيَّةَ عَامٍ ثُمَّ بَعَثَهُ. When asked, قَالَ كَمْ لَبِثْتَ? How long did you remain? He replied, قَالَ لَبِثْتُ يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْدَ يَوْمٍ. A day or part of a day. But it was said, قَالَ بَلْ لَبِثْتَ مِيَّةَ عَامٍ. No, you remained 100 years. Then came the proof. فَانْظُرْ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِكَ وَشَرَابِكَ لَمْ يَتَسَنَّهَا وَانْظُرْ إِلَىٰ حِمَارِكَ. Look at your food and drink, they have not decayed. Look at your donkey which should have rotted into bones yet remains preserved. Finally, وَلِنَجْعَلَكَ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ. This was done so that you may become a sign for mankind. The lesson is clear. If the capacity for life has not been completely lost, then revival is possible. Even a nation lying in ruins can rise again, provided the potential for renewal still exists.
Quranic parable of the embryo, a living sign of renewal. The Quran, after presenting the parable of the ruined town, turns to a living and visible example. وَأَنْظُرْ إِلَى الْإِظَامِ كَيْفَ نُنْشِزُهَا ثُمَّ نَكْسُوهَا لَحْمًا. 2:59. Look at the bones, how we raise them and then clothe them with flesh. This is most clearly seen in the womb. At first, there is nothing but a microscopic germ cell. From it, life begins to unfold. A clot forms, bones are shaped within it, flesh grows upon those bones, skin covers them, and eventually a living child emerges. Why does this happen? Because the initial germ contained the potential for life, and within the womb, under the law of God, it was nurtured and developed. The principle is profound. If the seed of life exists, and the conditions for growth are provided according to divine law, then renewal is possible. If the seed of life is absent, no child can be born. If the seed exists, but the nurturing conditions are disrupted, even abortion may occur. Thus, both elements are essential, the inherent capacity for life and the nurturing environment governed by God's law. Quranic principle of divine laws and human revival. The Quran explains that one must descend from the world of parables into the realm of observable reality. Wanzur, look with your own eyes at how life emerges in the womb, how bones are raised and clothed with flesh. When the truth became clear, the man said, فَلَمَّا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ قَالَ أَعْلَمُ أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Now I know that God has set measures, principles, and laws for everything, and wherever they are applied, their results manifest unfailingly. What we often call natural death is not the negation of life itself. Life may remain dormant, waiting to be awakened, provided that the divine system of nourishment and growth is followed. A nation, too, even when devastated, can regain vitality if it retains within itself the sense of loss and then aligns its development with God's system of rububiyyah. Despair should never overwhelm such a people, for the possibility of revival remains. The essential condition is that the nation must carry within its heart the awareness of what has been lost. This ihsas-i-zayan is the proof of latent life. If it then organizes its growth according to divine law, it can attain fresh vitality. But this renewal requires leadership. First, the messenger himself, and after him those who follow his path, the mutabi'in is sunnat, who shoulder the responsibility of guiding the community back to life.
Following the sunnah has been narrowed in our society. In our society, the concept of following the sunnah has been restricted to a very limited scope. In reality, following the sunnah meant that just as the great messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought life to a dead nation and elevated it to such heights that mighty empires like Persia and Rome fell beneath its feet, so too should the followers of his path uplift nations from the depths of humiliation to the heights of glory. This was the true meaning of sunnah. The condition of a nation that truly follows the sunnah should be such that it rescues other nations from degradation and leads them to progress. But when those who claim to follow the sunnah become dependent on others even for bread, then the situation becomes dire. Nations that act in this way end up merely gazing helplessly at others, as the Punjabi saying goes, but onaval taqdiren, or they make a slight movement only to fall back into slumber again.
My dear friends, following the Sunnah meant raising a nation from a state of lifelessness to the heights of glory. This is what the greatest revolutionary, the Messenger of God, accomplished. How did he do this? The answer comes in the next verse, a magnificent verse, which in common translations, commentaries, and stories is often narrated as follows. Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam asked God to show him how he gives life to the dead. God asked, "Do you not believe?" Ibrahim replied, "I do believe, but I seek reassurance." He was told, "Take 4 birds, slaughter them, cut them into pieces, mix their parts,
Place them on the tops of 4 mountains, then call them, and they will come fluttering back to you as living birds. This is the common narration, but the Quran here is expressing a far greater reality. It declares that new life can indeed be granted, the dead can be revived, and dead nations can be given fresh vitality. The real question was, Kaifa tuhil mota? How is the dead brought back to life? Ibrahim was asking for the method because he had been entrusted with the immense task of reviving a dead nation. The Quran provides the method for reviving nations. This is explained in verse 260, which we will take up in the next lesson. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ.